Okay, greetings, brothers and sisters. Today is Sunday, August 11th, 2025. This is something that I don't think I've ever articulated like this idea here, but it's really important idea, an important truth that the this sort of the misunderstanding about good versus evil. It's going to be a good, interesting day for me. We have these broody chicks, these broody chicken, and she's raising some chicks. And it's a very telling story. So I'm going to make a video today just about that. And I got to piece together a lot of different clips. I have probably 100 or so farm clips about the evolution of our frogs and various things that I've captured. And I haven't, when I was going to start doing more videos on Podcast now, I was going to do some farming stuff there. But the channel it's not, it's in worse shape in terms of the algorithms than this channel. So that didn't happen. But so I want to make this video today that's just about this one story about the broody chicken, the hen, and it has all these various things in it about life and, all these kind of interesting, past stuff about farming. And it's, I'm hoping to do it justice today, to really have to get all these things in there. But I wanted to do this voiceover first thing because it's just so important. This will be the 212th edition of the Journey series. Introduction and an introduction to my video that'll be up on Tuesday, September, 2nd, I guess. And so this idea that people have about good versus evil is that there's a good guy and a bad guy, or a good woman or a bad woman, or a good woman or a bad guy, or, good guy and a bad woman, or whatever it is, right? Two adversarial forces, a good team and a bad team, and a good country and a bad country, and, these things. That there's evil people and there's good people, and the good people are with God and eventually defeat the evil people. So that there's this idea that one group is anti-God people, bad people who are devil-worshipping people. There's a hero and there's a villain, and the hero comes in and kicks the villain's ass, like it's in all these shows, that the hero kills the villain, defeats the villain, whatever it is, right? And whatever way they frame it, like they'll try to make the guy, like he doesn't want to kill the villain, but he just has to, these things, right? This kind of idea that's there, that no matter how altruistic they try to make the hero in various shows and movies and books and whatever it might be, that there's this death of the villain, and once the hero kills the villain, everything's right with the world. And that's the one problem they have. And they have these superhero movies with deeply flawed heroes, and they're oftentimes the need to prove themselves and whatever it might be. Some kind of underlying psychological issues is a big thing now. They have to have some kind of backstory, and they have to fight somebody, but somehow they become good by fighting the villain. Like they have their own issues and their own inability to have relationships or whatever it might be. Like you see these flawed heroes, these historic, stories, tales, whatever it is, myths and fables and all the rest of those things. The most simplistic story is a very simple, innocent person, hero, that doesn't have much of a personality and doesn't want to indulge in the bad things of life, or whatever. And is, kind of a boring person who has to fight some complex villain who brings kind of the entertainment to the story because the villain is far more complex and far more interesting. But none of these things are true. Like, it's not how it actually works. And I think there's a lot of, certainly religious people and the rest of these people, especially religious, the bad religious people. And that, there's this evil, this devil-worshipping evil out there, and you got to go kill it and squish it and get rid of it and all these things. And, these people themselves they claim to be godly people, but they're not godly at all, right? But this, everyone has this kind of understanding. Biden's evil, we're the good guys. Trump's evil, we're the good guys, the opposition. That people all have this way of thinking. The liberals are good, the conservatives are evil. The conservatives are good, and the liberals are evil. Like, this is how it's always framed. And people are looking at their adversaries and seeing that there has to be some final battle. I mean, this is my whole life. Like, I was born the year after Kennedy was assassinated. And the Democrats and Republicans have been going at it, and there's no finality to it, right? It's just like a bad divorce, and it just keeps on getting worse. And America has consistently become more divided over my entire life. And so the division is there with no resolution, right? I watched the Cowboys documentary, and the documentary, really well done. And at the time that it's happening, Jerry Jones, the owner of the Cowboys, has just made a horrible trade to trade away Micah Parsons, after just doing a lot of bad decisions, because he's an owner that doesn't really have much football sense. Kind of a brilliant businessman who really shaped the NFL as it is today, as this, multi-billion-dollar, you know, entertainment business. And the kind of the core of the stories about him and his college football buddy Jimmy Johnson, who was a coach he hired, and their relationship, and then ultimately the reconciliation of their relationship, like the hatred between them and the hurt feelings, but they're both looking for credit, right? And I don't want to talk too much about it because it's worth watching. I'm going to watch it again with my wife in a couple of weeks probably. There's some of these good documentaries that they do, and I've had this experience of my life flashing before my eyes as I watch things where I was a part of those things as a spectator. There's a person who was alive during some of these things. Some things I know more about than others. Like there's things like now about Hurricane Katrina going on, and these other things. Some of them more recent and some of them, farther back. But it's it's kind of interesting watching the details of these big stories, things that were big stories, and entertainment, sports, and life and politics and things. But this adversarial relationship was the core of this story, which is this classic kind of thing. And they had some kind of reconciliation, which I won't talk about here, but it's kind of an interesting tale. But this idea that there's a bad guy and a good guy, a hero and a villain, and the hero has to defeat the villain is not accurate at all to what is essentially a good person. Like there might be, in the material plane of existence, there's someone who's viewed as a villain, and that may or may not be accurate. Like this is historical. That person might not be a villain at all. It's just that they're, that's how the story has been written. His story, right? It's history. And that there's somebody who's a good guy, and maybe it is like that. Maybe someone is villainous, and another person is, kind of has the good tendencies, good character qualities. And there is some combat, and there's a battle, and there's a winner and a loser, but that's some materialistic bullshit, right? Because the true spiritual people, these are higher developed souls. That's saints that come down here. And to whatever degree a spiritual person can do this, and there is different levels to this thing, again, this isn't my preference. Like based on my material life and what I see in the world, it's not my preference. Like it's not what I would want the world to be like. This is divine law. This is God's will, right? So we all have issues with God's will, like we all have issues with the divinity. And sometimes it's just our maturity that we're not mature enough to understand it. And so as you get older, you understand it better, and then you can embrace it and be grateful for it. But, you might not be something that you think it should be this way, right? There's one story in the Bible, and again, the Bible is not a great book, but it's stuff in there. It's about the prodigal son. The prodigal son returns. And the king has this big feast for the prodigal son because, the prodigal son have left the family. And all the other kids, there's like 9 other kids. And they're all like, what the fuck, right? We've been here. Why don't we get a big dinner, right? For sticking around, for doing the right thing. This idea that, the prodigal son comes back. And, the other stories are where, like, rich people going to heaven. There's a story that their master, the Sashmark system Chargy, would tell. That some guy goes to heaven, some rich guy, and there's all these poor people in line, average people. And this rich guy comes in with a big limousine and goes to the front of the line. And so one guy's, 100 people back, and he's getting pissed and fuming about it. So he gets up to St. Peter. He says, I can understand that rich people get privileges down in, earth. But even heaven, they get this stuff. Like, even heaven, they get better treatment. And Peter says, well, people like you come to us every day. But it's, 1 in a million when a rich person makes it to heaven, right? So this, it's easier for a camel to pass through an eye of a needle than a rich person getting to heaven, right? So this idea. So, these various, things that people don't like, right? This, these the ways of God. And I don't know how accurate the prodigal son is. I don't believe in that shit, but that's a biblical story. But this other thing is a definite spiritual truth. So if you're a saint, if a person's a saint and they're a higher developed soul, they do not come down to kill evil, destroy evil. I mean, there's the Mahabharata, which is probably the most epic story that's kind of like that idea that there's good and evil. But there's really higher developed souls and saints fighting on both sides of the Mahabharata. There's the Pandavas that are the good guys, and there are Kauravas that are the bad guys. They're cousins. But after the battle takes place, the Kali Yuga comes in, which is a bad fucking time. We're living in the Kali Yuga. So the Mahabharata happened about 5,000 years ago. And right after that is when the Kali Yuga came in. And so it was this, it was an epic time, but it didn't deliver happily ever after. In fact, the opposite. We became more and more degraded. Like, we've gone down ever since. And we just keep on going in the wrong direction. So, this idea that, Krishna was this higher developed soul that came in to defeat evil. Well, it's not accurate at all, because when he left, the world was going the wrong direction. And it's, part of a cycle. It isn't, it isn't an abomination. It isn't, something that's gone awry. It's something that the cycles go through, right? These 5, 10, 20,000 year cycles of these different yugas. And so, it's a part of what happens. It's not a, good or bad. But the truth of it is, when a saint or a spiritual person comes down, their job is not to find the evil people. And there's always evil people. There's always people who are embracing the dark side. And kick the shit out of them, and then restore Dharma, restore the godly will. The spiritual people come down, and they're supposed to uplift everybody without regard to what a piece of shit the person is. Because there's people who have been pieces of shit, like horrible people. St. Paul, Saul, was the third master of the Sashmark system. He was St. Paul in a past life. And St. Paul was just out and out fucking torturing and killing Christians. Just fucking killing them, like, in a totally bullshit way, right? And, he gets knocked off of this horse. Master Chargy had a memory of this, had a life memory of this thing that happened. Like, he had numerous, associations with St. Paul. And everything that he did for St. Paul, like, there was this great documentary about St. Paul as the Man, done by Peter Jennings on ABC News. And I watched it knowing Master Chargy, and that everything that was said about St. Paul the Man was something that Master Chargy had done. But he had evolved. It was whatever he did for the Christian religion as St. Paul, he did so much more as the third spiritual master in the Sashmark system. But he had this visual memory of this time. He said, that he was going this road. He was on this road to Damascus and the middle, what's now, I guess, Israel or Palestine or wherever it is. And like saw a bright light and he was knocked off his horse. And God said, Saul, why do that? Doth thou persecute me? But he said it in Hebrew, so or whatever it was, Aramaic, I don't know. But he had this memory, and so he was one guy who went from killing Christians to being killed himself for being Christian, right? Being persecuted, like he was won over to the Christian religion because of the spiritual, intervention he had. And so you take a bad person and turn him into a good person. You take a sinner and turn him into a saint. And so, this has happened. And so everybody has a potential saint in them. And there's people who have higher developed souls that have just gone awry. And they need to be salvaged in some way, right? And so they might seem like a villain, but, isn't it better that you redeem somebody or help somebody to redeem themselves than kill them and persecute them, right? So when a saint comes down, they can't view anybody as evil. When you're working in the Sajmark system, you can't see anybody as evil. As much as I make fun of people and mock people here, everybody is a potential saint. Everybody is a potential spiritual person. You have to view everybody like this. Even the people you hate, you don't like. I mean, you can't hate anybody as a spiritual person. But even the people who are repulsive and horrible people, they just have the worst qualities. But, some of those people have the softest hearts. They've just, been, they've been hardened. They've just as survival mechanisms and whatever, some scars that they have. But they have real great spiritual potential. They're just horrible people right now. And so, as a spiritual person, you have to look at everybody as a potential saint. That everybody has a soul and a potential to be actualized, right? Their soul is actualized. The self within, with a capital S. So we have a small self and ego. And so if there is any battle between good and evil, it happens within the person. That there is a villain inside of you, there is a demon inside of you, and there is an angel, there's a hero, you have this, you have a self within. You have the best version of yourself when you embrace your soul and you embrace the divine ways. And when you do that, you rise up to the highest level of your spiritual achievement. And that each person has this battle inside them, and the higher developed souls, the true good people, the people who are saintly and spiritual, they exist to help other people realize this spiritual goal. And they just have to, be there over and over again, no matter how many times people fuck up, no matter how many times people act like a piece of shit. They just keep on, working with that person and praying and doing spiritual work and helping to bring them to a higher level of existence, right? This is the Sajmark system that the master of the system can never disavow you. Like you can act up and you can be disciplined, you can be, whatever. That has to happen. But the person can never just cut you off. The master is always there hoping and working and doing what has to be done, in terms of elevating people to a highest level. Like they always have to look at somebody in their potential, looking for the saint. They don't look for the piece of shit. Like most of us, the rest of us, we look at people and we're like, oh, we're looking for what a piece of shit the other person is. We have trust issues, we have whatever. We've had issues with other people before, and we want to protect ourselves or whatever it might be. We don't want to get duped or whatever it might, whatever past things are there. And we're looking for the lowness in the person. People are always looking down instead of looking up. But how many people are looking for the saint and not someone else? Trying to pull out the saint in the person, right? Trying to pull out the person's higher nature. Charji, the third master of the Sajmark system, his name was Parthasarte Rajagopalachari, so his last name was Rajagopalachari. He was nicknamed Chari And in India, they say G, right? Ji, for like it's a sign of respect. And it doesn't have to be a spiritual person. It can be, a grandparent or an elder. Babaji, the second master, was called Ramchandra. He was a babu or a clerk. He worked in a courtroom, like a court filings. And he had G, they put G on the end of his name. He's, there's lots of Babajis, so, but he's, there's only one Babaji, right? But he was talking about how, a spiritual person, when Babaji walked into a room, people would say Babaji only saw the goodness in people. Like he looked for the saint within. Everything else was things that could be removed. It was just, it's not that he didn't see it. He didn't look for it. It wasn't part of his problem. It was just, he didn't want to know about it. He didn't want to, he didn't want to dive into the abyss of some piece of shit person's character issues and their egotistical behaviors and attitudes. Those are things just to be cleaned off. And Charji said it's like a candle, goes into some dark room, and everyone says, it's really dark in there, right? That's like the metaphor that the dark room's a person's inner world, but the candle illuminates it, right? So if you're a bright light, a spiritual light, everywhere you go, you illuminate things, and so you can see the saint within. You can see the hidden gem a person could be, right? You could see if this person would redeem themselves, what they could rise up into their potential. And you have to be that way. Like you have to be that way as a spiritual person. There's always hope that people will rise up to a different level, a higher level, and you have to do your best to help those people, even the worst people. In fact, especially the worst people, because there's evil. I read some of these whispers messages and the evil of politics. We see the evil, what's happened. And evil proliferates, right? It just continues to metastasize in some, cancerous way. And you could just say, fuck you to the people, treat them like lepers and, do whatever you have to do to get rid of the evil, but you can't because it's, it's something where it has to be rejected by the human race. And so instead of like isolating somebody, fuck you, you're a piece of shit, get out of here. You have to bring people in. And even if they are of a lower nature, if you can just get them to move a little bit, right? Like if you can just get them to be less of a piece of shit, like less of a egotistical person, less of a demon, the world would be a better place. Otherwise, you're isolating and, allowing the darkness just to go run amok. See, the problem with, in the battle of good versus evil that I'm talking about here, and it's not, like I said, a mano-a-mano type situation. An evil person has the freedom to do anything in a battle. They don't have any laws or rules. They don't have any, they don't have any, they don't have to answer to any God. They don't have to answer to any conscience. They can be sociopathic. They can be brutal. They can do the lowest levels of things. They don't have to adhere to some kind of spiritual principles, right? They don't have, they can make any of the wrong choices. Like a good person, a saintly person, a spiritual person has to adhere to the one right choice. They can't deviate from their spiritual path. Then they become, if they fight fire with fire, if they fight evil with evil, then they've lost, right? They've now been dragged into the evil part where they're going against God's will. They're going against what their soul wants, and they're embracing the darkness. So a saintly person has to just make the right choice. They just have to, doing all these, the hard path, the more difficult path. But they always would win because, and it isn't, again, good versus evil. But the saint always wins because they're following God's path. And God's path always, eventually, the divine path always, the divine laws, the divine principles always are embraced. And so it's not a happily ever after. It's that eventually God's will be done. And so if you embrace God's path and will, even though it's more difficult, where an evil person has all the freedom to do the wrong thing and take shortcuts and and do things, in a fucking deceitful, evil way, where they're manipulating people and lying and tricking and doing all the things to accomplish their goals, eventually the truth catches up with them. It just does. It has to. Like it can't, if it isn't this life, it's some future life. But they can't escape the consequences for their bullshit actions. Like every time you go against God's will, there's consequences. You've created consequences for yourself because you've created some deviant, deviant reality, deviant. This is where people think about the multiverse. The multiverse isn't different planes of existence where you've made these choices. It's every time you make a wrong choice, you've created consequences for yourself and oftentimes other people. And then that has to be played out. Like it has to eventually be redeemed. You have to go back and fix it, like Groundhog Day kind of situation, the movie Groundhog Day. You eventually have to get it right. So you'll just keep on living the same life over and over again, making the same mistakes until you start correcting these things, these tendencies, where you embrace the one right path, the one choice that God wants you to make. There's always just one. And you have to find that choice. And so, in all that, the hero or the saint always is victorious because you've embraced the truth. Like this is what you have to do, whether you fucking like it or not, like whether your ego likes it or not, and you just do it. You do what's the right thing over and over again, and then inevitably it works out because it has to, because it's the right thing. Where the sinner has the demon has all the potential to do so many different things to achieve victory, but can't do the one thing, which is embrace God's will, that will allow them to, eventually reach their goal, their true goal. And so that's, the advantage of being the spiritual person is inevitably things work out the way that the path that you're on is justified. Whereas the saint or the sinner or the demon inevitably is destroyed by their own bad actions. And they have to come to it. They have to eventually bow before God. Because they're like out there saying, fuck you, God, I'm going to do my own thing. And so there's no battle. A bad person has made a bunch of mistakes that inevitably will come back on them. That they have consequences for all their bad behavior. And the saint just has to just do what God wants him to do. There's a situation in the Sajmark system where Babaji was ordered to take some souls and just destroy the whole soul. That the soul was so far gone. I mean, it's a rare occasion. It's a rare situation. That a wayward soul that can't be redeemed, that will not ever fix itself. It's just gone in the wrong direction and has to be completely destroyed. Has to their soul, like not just their life. Like everyone dies. Your life is just a short part of your eternal soul. Like your eternal soul lives through eternity, but there's cases where that's just like, well, this soul's never going to get it. I mean, there's just there can't be. It will never reverse its course. And when that's the occasion and your eternal soul is wiped out and your whole existence your true existence is gone. Your true potential, your true everything. And that's not, good versus evil. That's a saint being ordered to take care of some abomination that can't be fixed. The other part of this is, I read this Whispers of the Brighter World message in a recent video. And then, of course, in the Journey series where he talked about politics and how it's just this evil which we can all see. Most of us can see that. It's just pure evil, and it's just godless, right? And in that, like they say, war is hell. These things, wars and these other things. But in all that, there is sometimes higher developed souls play a role. Like you could say Trump might be some saint who's just had to embrace, and I'm not saying he is, but he's fulfilling a part of the divine drama, the things that have to happen. And so that's, not for us to say. It's, it is whatever it is. Like, everyone gets their own divine justice, right? But it's the tendencies of the people that embrace this political scumbaggery. It has to change, right? But there's a situation now where we have massive population reduction. And so the people that won't change won't be invited back. They won't be allowed to reincarnate here. I believe that there's these people that have this dark power, and they incarnate life after life back in these bloodlines, back in these families, back in these kind of situations. They're willing it to be so. But it goes against the divine order, where you're supposed to come back and redeem yourself. You're supposed to be learning and growing and changing. And as a soul, that your soul says, all right, you fuck that up, to your ego, and go back and fix it, right? Like, now, in your next life, you have to change this. But these people just keep on leaning into their darkness and coming back, these things. But it gets to a point where they just will be excluded. That their presence on Earth will no longer be tolerated, and they'll have to go somewhere else to redeem themselves. There's a time where Babaji was told to take this evil person and pin their soul up to Antarctica, or the North Pole or wherever it is, some cold frozen place, and their soul just sat there for 10,000 years. Hopefully getting a taste of mundane, boring, just this place that has no excitement, no bells and whistles, and all these things. And eventually we'll realize the error of its ways, or whatever it is. Like, it almost has to. It has a choice, but it just, to endure something like that and come back and do more bad shit, but eventually the choices are taken away from it. They just can't be allowed to continue to thwart the divine will. But in every spiritual journey, a person makes mistakes. In every life, a person makes mistakes. People get mad at God. They go against God's will. They do what they do. It's part of your spiritual journey. You're learning. Sometimes you just don't know. Like, you have to experience things to understand what you're supposed to do. It's just as you move through life. I've talked about how, it's probably not until my 50s where I became what I would consider a competent person. Like, I just kind of understood it. I got what I was supposed to do, and, these things. It took a lot of spiritual cleaning and a lot of, immature behaviors, and then I just understood it. And I'm like, well, now I'm dying. I'm dying. Like, I'm moving towards death. It's like a sad part about, like, not even just learning things. Like, there's parts of me, parts of my soul that hadn't been integrated into my person, and I had to go through various things for that to happen. Like, you have all these things when you come out of your mom, you're helpless, you're worthless, you have, you're a cute little baby, but you have no abilities, you don't know how to do anything. And you have to learn all these various skills: walking, talking, going to the bathroom in a controlled manner, eating, and eating for yourself, cooking, and learn how to work, and read and write, and all these things. Learn all these skills. And then as you get older, you have these other things. And some wisdom starts coming to you, and you go through things, and it pulls things that you have available to you, like you're downloading things all the time. But as you do that, it comes through a price of your life energy, and you're getting older, and then next thing you know, you're like you're in the death process, where death is clearly ahead of you, and you finally understand how life works, and you're like dying. All your youthful energy, all your things, your testosterone levels, your things that had thwarted your issues or whatever, your emotions and things that you had no control over, and not understanding life, and all of a sudden you're ready to contribute, and it's too late. Like, your time is up. Right? So that's the sad part of these short lives that we live here. But as sometimes it's bad things that come out of you. You're a good person, then you get you at least have good intentions, and you find yourself in a position of power, and the power brings out darkness and things that you were a bad king in a past life, or a bad whatever you were, and you now have this power, and it brings out the the demon within. So I mean, this is how life works, and so it's mistakes are always there. People leave their spiritual path, and so we all need to be compassionate and empathetic because everyone goes through it. Everybody has these times, and hopefully, maybe it takes lifetimes for somebody to work through these various tendencies. Like a person comes in and as a new soul and sees wealth and power as a goal, and they get wealth and power and they go, oh, this isn't it, right? So what is there? And then they eventually find spirituality. They find that there's a divinity within them, and they cultivate a relationship with God, and then they're on this path. And that might take 20 lifetimes. Who knows how long it'll take for them to realize their full potential, but they're not on this path. But getting people on this path and getting people to choose this path is very difficult, and we see what's going on now in the world. But there's always this essence, right? Like this is what I was saying. The Sajmark masters can never reject a person. They have to always hold out hope and do what they can to help a person make the right choices. But a person can reject them anytime they want, because you have this. Everyone has the ability to choose the wrong thing. But a divine person, a godly person, just has to always be there and do the right thing, right? Which is to be there not only for your own spiritual journey, but also be an example and a teacher in some cases, or a coach in some cases, or a well-wisher in others. But you're always there with other people doing what you can to help them. And that's why in the Sajmark tradition, the masters of the system, when they had disciples, they had people that were going and doing bullshit things, doing evil things, bad things. They always blamed themselves, right? They blame themselves for not being able to help this person elevate, because that's what you have to be like. You have to always be taking responsibility for the lack of your whatever your issues are. But that has caused problems, and with the dodgy stuff and all these things, because a lot of times it's just people are pieces of shit, and there's just nothing that anybody can do about it, especially now. And they might not always be that way. Maybe at least in this life they are. And then you understand that, and it's just you do what you can pray for them, and you can not pray that like people pray that other people change and for their sake, right? A wife praying that her husband isn't a piece of shit that beats her for her sake, which is understandable. I don't begrudge her that, but not praying for a person to change for their sake. You don't care about, like, it's not about you. It's about, oh, this piece of person's a piece of shit. I pray that you change, you piece of shit. That's not a real prayer. But somebody's, who sees the potential within you and hopes that you rise up and take your higher nature. So there is no, but in this, like, there's no battle of good and evil, because the truly good people are trying to elevate everybody. They come down to pull everybody up. It just doesn't work. At least it hasn't worked to any large extent, and that's the problem with humanity. It's just that people just won't get it. They just won't embrace their higher nature. No matter how many times they've lived their life, they just keep on going in the wrong fucking direction. I mean, for the most part, and that's the sad part. And then it becomes a situation. It's like, well, maybe this isn't going to work out. Like this group, these genetics, these tendencies, these people, this planet, it just has to be wiped out. Like all the human beings have got to be erased and try something else, because the souls have to, the souls of these people then have to figure out how they're going to get it in some different format, some different place, some different time period, some different, plane of existence, whatever it might be. But that's taken care of by God. It's not something you have to do, I have to do. It's not something that anybody has to do. Like the people who do embrace their spiritual path, no matter how difficult it is. I mean, this idea is something that I struggle with. That is, everyone's going to struggle with it a little bit. You have this idea that people are just evil, and you just want to see them punished for their evil doing. You want to see them go to jail. You want to see them hurt or killed or whatever it is, because they've done so many bad things. But you don't have to worry about it, because there is Things are accounted for here on planet Earth. There's nothing goes unnoticed. There's nobody gets away with anything. There's consequences for every action, every mistake you make, every wrong choice you make. There are consequences, and we all see it in our own lives. We can see it in the lives of other people. It's there. The consequences maybe are not immediate, but they come. And some of the consequences is the loneliness and the isolation and this mental illness that people who make wrong choices feel. I mean, they hate themselves and they're just miserable. And so they might not go to jail, but they're in a prison of their own making. Because although they look like they're rich and powerful, I mean, you see these rich and powerful people, you see these politicians, look at their fucking faces. Look at their fucking depressed, soulless, dead faces, right? They're miserable, and they're disconnected from God and love and these things, and they just keep on making the same bad choices over and over again, and they're miserable. You can see it, like they're not, a saintly person, an older person who's lived a good life. They radiate love. You can see it in their eyes. There's a wisdom there. There's just a softness, and they're just a reward for doing the right thing. They're dying with grace. They're willing. They're embracing the end of their existence. They look forward to returning to the source. They're in contact with their spiritual nature, their spiritual side, and they die well. Other people are scared shitless of dying. Like they start worrying. Like you have these evil people that all of a sudden call up a priest or a reverend or, a monk or, guru or whatever it is. And they're dying and they're like, fuck. They have a sense of the consequences that await them, right? Not that there's any hell, like hell is here. Like hell is, some people are living heavenly lives. They live in heaven on earth. The kingdom of heaven is within. But some people live in, a hell of their own making. Most people live in a hell of their own making. And so, there's just the inevitable outcome of going against God's will. There's no good or evil because it all comes back to what you are doing to yourself. Every bad choice you make, every evil choice you make is coming back around, and you're going to have to suffer the consequences. And it's there in front of everybody. They just don't want to see it. All right, I think that's enough. I'm getting tired, and I think this is, it's. I don't think there's anything more to add to this. Side effects are your body's way of notifying you that you've been poisoned. Another quality meme here to start off the day with. So today is Monday, September 1st. I did a long voiceover yesterday that you guys have already probably listened to. Maybe not. Who knows? But if you're in this point of the video, that happened. So this video is probably going to be a little bit shorter because we're 45 minutes in or whatever it is. So I just want to say a little bit more about this good versus evil thing I was talking about. And so you cannot kill evil. People think you can murder evil, you get rid of evil. You can't eradicate evil by just stopping it out. You can't use force to kill evil, right? Evil exists for a reason. And evil exists because there's freedom of choice. And if there's freedom of choice, then there are infinite amount of wrong choices. I've talked about this in various videos. There's one right choice, and there's a lot of wrong choices, infinite amount of wrong choices. Some choices are better than others. But the one right choice is to ask God, what should I do here? You have to form some internal relationship with God and develop the capacity to really hear God. Lots of people ask God what to do, but then they make something up, right? Their ego makes something up convenient to God told me to do this, right? I did communicate with God. There's this time where I was saying things about Christianity, and there's some Christian person arguing with me. This is back when I used to, interact with my people who commented. And he was saying, something. I said, why don't you just ask Jesus? Like, ask Jesus directly if I'm right or wrong. Ask him. Like, why don't you pray to Jesus and ask? In fact, and I should say that more often here. To Christians or anybody else, ask God. Like if I say something and you're concerned or you don't believe in it, why don't you ask God about it? Because like I can't, you're rejecting something, and ask God for an answer. Don't put it on me. I'm just another person. But like, go ask. Form a relationship with God. If you're Christian, ask Jesus. Pray to Jesus and ask. If this is right. And so the person kept on coming back to me with different things. I said, just ask Jesus. I said, I'm done with this. Whatever it is. And the person said, I did ask Jesus, and he said you were full of shit. Right? And so, which is, hysterically funny, but there's one right choice, and that's to ask God what to do, and then develop the capacity to receive and honor the answer. And every other choice is done without partnership with God. And you might make good choices and the right choice, but if you don't include God, it's never just never the right choice. The inclusion of God in the decision making is always the best choice. It's the only choice. And so every other choice is a deviation. And a choice some of them are worse than others, right? But once you start making decisions and you don't care what God thinks, or you're not checking with God, or you're not, God isn't a part of their decision making process, your decisions go from bad to worse. They don't get better, they get worse. And so this is where evil exists. This is how evil proliferates in the world. And you can't get rid of that unless you get rid of freedom of choice, which is something that most people who are, so-called, they think they're good people or heroes, would never say, oh, we got to get rid of our freedom of choice. People who are big-time freedom people and think they're also heroes, right? But the ultimate in good guy, the ultimate good guy, the ultimate hero, the ultimate saint is a person who no longer makes choices of their own. And everything, they have developed such a capacity that God dictates to them what they do in every even the smallest of choices. That everything you do, you asking God permission, whether it's even drinking a glass of water. Babaji, the second master of the Sajmark system, was one of those people that intercommuned with these higher developed souls. And he said, somebody asked him, what can you do? He said, with God's permission, I can spin the universe like a top. But without it, I can't take a drink of water, which is the ultimate in surrendering your will to God's will. That you can't even have a thought. You can't have a fantasy or let your mind wander. You can't, do anything that isn't based on what God wants you to do. Every ounce of your energy, every second of your time is devoted to the service of God, and a real way, like in a 100% capacity. There's no resistance. There's no having to think things over. There's no, Jesus, God, you want me to do this? Right? There's none of that. There's no hesitation. There's no, Father, why had thou persecute me? There's no doubt. There's no, anything, right? Like, the truly, like, 100% spiritual person no longer has any kind of freedom of choice or anything else. They are just submitting to God's will 100% of the time. And so that's, it's a huge ask, because we like to do what we want to do. We want to have some of our own personal sovereignty in our choices. We want to be able to make mistakes. We want to be able to do the wrong thing. That's why I say, you can't really judge other people, because unless you're 100% committed, unless you're, you've given up your ability to choose to do the wrong thing, then they're all sinners. We're all partially doing evil. Like, we all have the potential for making the wrong decision. And, and even if you've learned your lessons and you commit, you're that guy, or you're the, Babaji type of person who's just 100% committed to doing God's work. You had a past in which you weren't. You went through whatever you went through. And so there are some people who there's no way back for them. Some souls, like I said in the other voiceover, there's just no way back for them. But like I said earlier, like with the racing of the souls, that can only be done if God instructs a saint to do it, right? As a saint, you can't act unless God says, yeah, you have to stop this person. You have to do this. This person has to be stopped, right? There has to be some, divine, oversight, right? Some divine permission with everything else. Like a saintly person has to ask God first before acting, and some things just have to run their course because they're, like Donald Trump isn't asking God what to do, but is he doing God's work by destroying, by being a part of the destruction of the system? The people who run the system who are just helping to destroy it, like all those people, like they're not doing God's work intentionally, but if the system is supposed to come down because of divine will, then they are, they're doing what they should do. Like the rest of us don't like it. They're destroying the system we're 100% dependent on. And so we have concerns and we see the people as evil, but, they're doing something that needs to be done. And they can't do it as it's like some saint who gets ordered to destroy the system. Like a saint would have real difficulty being a politician. Like you wouldn't see spiritual people being politicians because it's, goes against all the things you need to do to be right with God. And so to obtain the presidency, to obtain $1 trillion of wealth, all these, wealthy families, whatever they are, to obtain this kind of power, you have to be a non-saintly person. The religious power, the people who run these religions are probably the most unspiritual people that there are. People who pretend they speak for God and have, copyrighted God in some way. And they represent God, and they act as a barrier between people and divinity. They're constantly, that's why the religions are always killing their saints. If you go through Christianity, all the saints that came after Jesus, and of course Jesus and his disciples, were all killed by the church, by the powerful people. And so when somebody becomes spiritual in the religion, they start to recognize that person as a problem. You can't have spiritual people in a religion. And so these are the kind of key things that people don't understand about good and evil, right? That evil isn't about, doing bad things and all that, doing evil, having an evil plan and, going against the will of society, right? Breaking laws and doing things that are go against the societal will. It's simply making choices without God's permission. And when you start on that path, you embrace that path, it always leads to more and more deviant choices until you're like a full-on demon. And that's what you see all across society today. And we have so many people on that, there's a spectrum, like I said, that saintly people have to come back and do their best to bring everybody back. And, people who don't want to come back. So that's why all these spiritual movements fail, because, it's just not like getting rid of one bad apple or like 10% of the people who have bad tendencies. It's, everybody wants they want to do their things without thinking about God. They want to indulge without thinking about God. And so as long as that's the case, then everybody is, willfully going against the will of God. And, many people have the ability to make that switch and change. They just won't do it. Even on a little bit, like just, practicing a little bit of, I'm going to ask God, about this. I'm going to check in with God. I'm going to start having a dialogue with the divinity within me. And so almost nobody wants that and then wants to try it. And so, it's a failed species as long as that's the case. Because people have the ability to do that and choose not to. And willfully so. Arrogantly so, right? Well, anyways, let's move on to the other stuff here.
President Trump making his expectations clear this week. He wants unwavering loyalty and won't tolerate any dissent. Nowhere was that more clearly on display than the televised cabinet meeting lasting over 3 hours, in which Trump's team, quote, took their turns, each working a little bit harder than the last to offer Mr. Trump praise.
You look, I guess they have to say this, but, yeah, have we seen this before? Like I mean, they're called the taint lickers for a reason, right?
You made this country safe. You opened up the economy. You enforced the law.
It's just such a great opportunity, really, to recognize your leadership as a true champion for working people.
Okay, Tulsi.
Sir, as we've said very often, economic security is national security, and our country has never been so secure thanks to you. You have brought us back from the edge.
Mr. President, I invite you to see your big, beautiful face on a banner in front of the Department of Labor, because you are really the transformational president of the American worker.
Well, this is the banner the Labor Secretary
She wins.
was referring to, unfurled, in fact, this week outside the department headquarters.
Is that Teddy Roosevelt?
Michael Hardaway and former Representative Charlie Dent are back with us. So, guys, Michael, you first. When you look at everything together, endless praise at that televised cabinet meeting, National Guard soldiers patrolling D.C. in the shadow of a giant banner of Trump's face, trying to take over running Union Station from Amtrak, firings at the CDC. Does this reflect democracy or something else?
Okay, who gives a shit what he has to say?
In fact, Max Burns writes, up until now, presidents haven't needed to be glorified in this way, but Trump's, quote, need for validation is leading our nation down the dark path of strongman autocracy.
I mean, it's brutal. Like, it's so bad. There's something here that the title of this video is about Trump's third term.
Authoritarianism, and predicted Trump will resist leaving office. Listen to this.
I don't think Donald Trump wants another election. You think for a second you want... I have 24 Trump 2028 hats. His folks keep sending me.
And you think he's going to run again?
No, don't give me... Who spends $200 million on a ballroom at their home and then leaves the house? This is serious.
You may have just heard former White House attorney Ty Cobb say to me in the last segment, the last question I asked him, what is it that Trump has not yet done that you worry he will do? And he said, very simply, try to stop an election. So is Trump trolling, or is he serious when he jokes about sticking around through 2028 or running again? I mean, regardless of our constitutional constraints, why does he keep talking about Trump 2028?
He's dead serious. I mean, this is the way that he operates.
Okay, so that was the title of this was Trump's dead serious, but it's just this dude quoting, himself. I mean, them quoting this dude. Trump has flirted with the idea. Trump's health is not going to hold up. And if he's bloating and, who knows, but he'll be extraordinarily senile. Let me find this Jerry Jones thing. I heard it this morning. And so, let's go to that. Jerry Jones is a showman and an attention hoe like Donald Trump. He loves attention. He's talked about how he's had these weird contract disputes every year with players he has to sign, and he doesn't sign them, and it makes people talk about the Cowboys, and the Cowboys is the number one football franchise, maybe the number one sports franchise in the world, and so there's always going to be cowboy talk. People are interested. They have lots of fans and lots of haters. And so you can see how this guy loves the attention. He got into this drama with Jimmy Johnson, his college teammate and good personal friend, and won over credit of the Herschel Walker trade and other things. And then this Netflix documentary was all about that. And he has oversigned players and made bad decisions based in wanting attention and these other things that he does, even though he hasn't won anything significantly in 30 years, right? He's mishandled the franchise, very much like a Trump-like person. And he had this player that they drafted, and he's the GM of the team, and he doesn't make good football decisions. Luckily they drafted this guy, Micah Parsons, who turned out to be the number one edge rusher in the league and somebody who was up for a contract extension. But Jerry Jones bungled the whole thing. And, he had this press conference about this horrible trade that he made, right? where everybody knows that he's lost it. He's made a bad decision. If he was going to trade the guy, he should have done it months ago when there would have been draft picks he could have picked for this year, and he could have received better offers. Like, he waited too long and made it personal, right? It's a bad decision. But he said something, I heard this morning, that I had missed when he first talked about this. But he says this, right?
Agree. But this was by design. I did.
It wasn't by design. It was by impulsivity and emotion and just, reactivity. It was not a plan at all. Like, he didn't plan this.
Make Mike an offer. It wasn't acceptable, and I honor the.
Okay, so him saying he made an offer and it wasn't acceptable. The truth is, and I'm talking about this guy's age, right? This guy's 80, and he's had cancer. He's been battling cancer for 10 years, and he just doesn't make good decisions. But he said he made Micah an offer, which was $40 million. Micah signed with the Green Bay Packers for $47 million. And so that's $28 million over 4 years. Is it 28? 28, yeah. That he would have been leaving on the table. So he was trying to underpay him. The offer wasn't acceptable, right? He said it wasn't acceptable. And he's trying to say Micah didn't accept it, but nobody would have, right? So that was the first part.
And I honor the fact that it wasn't done in the way that he wanted to do it through an agent.
So let me go back and play that whole thing again.
Make Mike an offer. It wasn't acceptable. And I honor the fact that it wasn't done in the way that he wanted to do it through an agent.
So what happened, if you guys understand the story, you'll know why I'm laughing. But Micah Parsons and him had a meeting. And Micah Parsons went into it thinking it was just a football meeting. Jerry was very friendly with his team. He's more, hands-on. He's the GM and also the manager, and also the owner. And so he has more personal connections with his players. But Jerry thought it was a negotiation with a 25-year-old kid. Jerry's a hardened businessman who's, he's transformed the NFL in various ways. And Jerry thought that they had a handshake deal at $40 million, which was Micah Parsons being extraordinarily underpaid for 5 years. So he was trying to get him for 5 years at a cheap discount when his market price was at least $47 million. Maybe other teams would have paid him more, right? So, he's asking the guy to give up $7 million, and Jerry's a multi-billionaire, and the franchise is worth $11 billion. The Cowboys, and so he's saying, and when Micah Parsons said, okay, like, we'll talk to my agent about this, and Jerry said, well, fuck you, we're not talking to your agent, and he didn't want to deal with an agent, which is how it works. Like, are you saying you no longer are dealing with agents? Are you saying you're only going to negotiate contracts with the player directly? That's why people have business people, right? That's why people have agents and managers, because they have people who are, good at business. They're good at football. You're expecting a 25-year-old kid to negotiate his own deal? He's got an agent. He's got to pay the agent commission. You're saying that you want all your players to go without being an agent? And so this was where he decided to trade him. He made him an unacceptable offer. And if he was going to do that, he should have traded him earlier. He had said that he was going to make Micah Parsons play out his last year of his contract this year, and then franchise tag him, which is a thing the NFL can do, where they put a tag on one guy. They get to do it for one guy, where the guy has to play for them for a year and can't become a free agent. And they got paid. He would have got paid $25 million, which would have been less than his $40-something million. Micah Parsons said, fuck you, I'm going to pretend I have a back injury, and I'm going to receive my money, and I'm just not going to play. And so, and other things that he did that pissed Jerry off, so he decided to unload the guy, and he made a bad decision. But this is all, he's done these things before. He's made bad decisions before, but he's made a bad decision pretty much every year for the past so many years, like things that are, he's slipping. because he's 80 fucking years old. If you can't run a fucking football team when you're that old, I mean, look at Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton's Trump's age. Bill Clinton is nowhere near where he was when he was a president. You might not like Bill Clinton as a politician, but he's sharper when he was younger, and Trump is starting to slip. He's slipping, just like Joe Biden was really starting to slip. Like it happens to you when you get into your 70s and 80s. And it's not a time where you take on stressful, demanding jobs that suck the energy. You look at every president out there, and they just get older. And so, Trump is, I mean, he's really done after the midterms. When he gets his ass kicked in the midterms, they no longer can do Trump shit. And like, there's going to be opposition, and it's going to be a civil war in this fucking country. Without, most of the Trumpers will probably have left him by then, because the economy will and the Democrats have every reason to make sure that life sucks for you. That the financial issues that you're going to suffer because of the tariffs and the rest are going to happen. And so this is, where we're at, right? Because, this country's going down like it has to. Like I said in the voiceover, it's like God's will. And so that's why we had a Biden and we had a Trump, and we'll have a Gavin Newsom or whoever, because there's there's nobody out there that's going to save the country from itself, right? The country from its destiny, which is a collapse. Like, this is why the empires don't last, right?
It wasn't acceptable, and I honor the fact that it wasn't done in the way that he wanted to do it, through an agent.
Everybody does it through an agent. It's not the way he wanted it done. It's the way it's done, right?
So he was made an offer. There's not an ounce of vindictiveness. There's no bad feeling.
So, like, that's why he's saying he did this. He traded him for an inferior, older player. Micah Parsons is 26. And again, this is all part of a show. Who knows what, really is going on here? Like, the NFL is, it's WWE type of stuff, right? It's entertainment. But he traded him for a 30-year-old player who's good at stopping the run, but not the best at stopping the run. Micah Parsons the best at getting to the quarterback, which is the most valuable position on the defense is an edge rusher, somebody who gets to the quarterback. That's why they make the most money, because you need a pass rush. You need people who can wreck the offense on the other team. And so Micah Parsons was one of those guys, but they were very susceptible to the run. Teams ran on Dallas, and that's a problem. And but the solution wasn't a 30-year-old guy who is okay against the run, right? And a couple of first round draft picks is what you got. It's a bad deal for a guy who's a businessman. He got a bad deal because this was all, like he said, it was based in the negotiation, offering him less money than the guy was going to take, and then involving an agent, right? Which is everyone was going to. Anybody in Micah Parsons' position was going to say no. His agent was going to say no, and so you should have done this earlier if you're going to offer him bullshit, right? He said he had him for 3 years, in an interview, but then he went around and made a bad trade. So this wasn't part of a plan, right? Like, and I don't know if he even sees it because his brain doesn't work. He's had cancer and he's 80 years old. He had severe cancer for 10 years, and and other things. And he's and the arrogance always gets to you, right? And he's one of these people. His wife said that when they won the Super Bowl, that he couldn't wait to wreck it. Like, he couldn't wait to wreck He found reasons to get rid of the guy who's the one quality coach he's been able to work with. And he took control over the team, and it's been a piece of shit ever since. Very similar to Trump in a personality and these things. I mean, just a deeply flawed person was really fucking needy. Trump needing to be validated, right? And so this is what happens. If you can watch what's happened to the Dallas Cowboys, you can see that what's happening with America. Because these type of guys, this is what happens when they get power. It becomes all about them. And everything's about Trump. And Trump is not a good person for everyone to be thinking about all the time. The more you think about somebody, the more that you become them. The more that you're focused on somebody, the more that, like, Trump is an example of poor behavior, and everybody's has an inner Trump now. They have Trump inside them, because they're thinking about Trump all the time. And he's an example of, like, behaviors and attitudes, and people are, just like if you get abused, you have an abuser inside of you. This abuser is now a part of your internal world. And you hear their voice, like if you have a parent that's abusive to you, emotionally, physically, sexually, or verbally, like verbally, probably the big one, then that voice is inside your head. If your parent is telling you what a piece of shit you are your whole life, you hear that voice. It's telling you what a piece of shit you are for the rest of your life, unless you somehow can extricate that abuser from inside of you, right? You have to remove that inner voice. And now everybody has an inner Trump. And the inner Trump is, a negative part of your internal world now.
And Natural Resources Committees. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here, Congresswoman. You just heard DHS Secretary Noem there talking about expanding ICE operations on Saturday.
Okay, so this was supposed to be about Epstein.
Ends to pressure Congress to pass the bipartisan Epstein Files Transparency Act, compelling the DOJ to release all documents in the files. Congressman Ro Khanna told Meet the Press earlier that he expects that bill to pass when Congress reconvenes. Take a listen to him.
I spoke to Congressman Massey. You had us both on a few weeks ago. We will have the petition live on September 2nd. We have all 212 Democrats committed to signing it. He has 12 Republicans. Only 6 of them have to sign it.
So we've heard him say earlier what we expect to hear will be explosive. You are a member of the Oversight Committee. What do you expect to hear?
The fact that we have victims who have never spoken up before that feel so
It's funny, like, now the Democrats care about the Epstein victims.
Outraged and compelled by the way that the Trump administration has been handling and covering up this entire story. I think that in and of itself demonstrates the urgency and demonstrates that it is in fact going to be explosive. It's going to be a big week on the Epstein front. As you know, over the last couple of weeks, we received about 33,000 pages worth of documents that we ultimately found out only the 97%.
Okay, so what I want to say about this is, the title is Trump Can Only Cover Up the Epstein Issues for So Much Longer. You guys have never been able to get this fucking guy, right? And there's a reason for it, right? Like, it's not that Trump is somehow some sort of political superhero. It's because the powers that be, the Democrats themselves, and the Democratic media, the left-leaning media, don't want to get him. Like, he's been an asset for everybody. And the Democrats and the media, their whole business model is to focus on Trump, like I was just saying. So it's made it all about Trump. And the more people hear about Trump and think about Trump, the more they integrate Trump into their internal world. Like, Trump is a president is an example. When Bill Clinton got up and he had this weird sexual encounter with an 18-year-old intern, which is, like a total, she was 18 years old, so she's barely legal, right? And in the Oval Office, degrading the Oval Office. And then lied about it, and then just said, fuck you. He should have been fired. But he said, no, I'm not going to be fired. And he was an example to kids. Like, this is the president who, is this ideal of the president is this sacred office, and the person is supposed to behave in a way to do right by the office. And when he just said, fuck you, I'm not going to retire, I'm going to make this about me and not about what should happen, just because I'm going to uphold common decency says I should retire, right? And when he did that, it started what you see now. Like, this big fuck you from the presidency that I'm more important than everybody else in the country. And then everybody integrates that and sees that as an example, young kids. I mean, look at the moral degradation since Bill Clinton. And so we'll think about what the moral degradation is now under Trump and Joe Biden, because they're both depraved people and they're both selfish and the rest of these things. And so, like, this is something for people to understand. Like, this, the president more than anybody else is supposed to be an example of good character qualities and these things. And that just doesn't exist anymore. People don't even know what good character is. Like people don't even. There's no sense of it. There's no sense of duty or honor or shame or these things. They can just do whatever they want and just they don't have to apologize for it. And Trump is, the stupidity behind it. I watched the Jussie Smollett Netflix thing, and the whole thing is, based on the premise that Jussie Smollett had this fantasy that, he wanted to look like a tough guy and fight back against MAGA racists, and he, made up they contrived this plan to have his employees, his personal trainer, and his brother attack him on the street, and have it on video of him fighting back. But the video camera was pointed the wrong way, so they didn't have any, they didn't have a tape of the thing, right? And he was hoping to use that to bolster his credibility. His big thing was that he fought back, but he's making up imaginary villains that hate him so much on a show that MAGA people don't even know who exists. I had never heard of the show before. It certainly isn't for white Republicans, this show Empire. It's about Chicago, and the cast is mostly African American. And he said that these MAGA guys, called him a racial slur and a homophobic slur, and talked about him being on Empire, and then beat him up and put a noose around his neck that was made out of clothesline. And he kept the noose on his neck until the cops got there. Who would be out there, and it's like 15 below zero out there at 2:00 in the morning, and that these guys hate him so much they're willing to go out there in the middle of the night. It's silly. No one's going to do that. No one hates. Why would they hate you so much that they would do that? It's just silly. And they call it, this is MAGA country, when he wanted to make it about Trump and MAGA, and so these were the lines they had to say for him to be able to look like his story was but he made up these imaginary villains because no one's going to fucking do that. Nobody cares about Jussie Smollett. No one's going to get up at 2 a.m. and go find him at a Subway and put a noose around his neck as a show, because it's one thing to beat people up, but then this becomes a hate crime when you put a noose around his neck. Where are they going to lynch him, right? There's no place. It's silly. And at the end of the documentary, they have these people that are trying to show that the Chicago police have conspired to set him up, and all these things, and trying to show that he's innocent, based in what mostly we call crazy conspiracy theorists, right? But it shows you that you can find people that will believe that Jussie Smollett is somehow victimized. There are going to be people who believe that there's some conspiracy against him, because that's what's happened. We see that here, that people will believe whatever. Don't trust the government, don't trust the official story, and you can make up a story and will create whatever your own facts and suspicion and your own speculation and convince people of anything, because that's the time we live in. There's no truth anymore, right? Anybody can say, oh, that's just fake news, and because the news is no longer credible, and the agencies, the police, and the government, and the corporations are not trustworthy, and so you have a society full of liars and cheaters, and so nobody can believe anything anymore. We've lost faith in everything, and people just make up their own reality, based in whatever preferences they have. And so because of that, there's no consequences. There's no consequences for him. We see him. He's pictured with this guy, and he's pictured with the Clintons, and he gave money to the Clintons, and he was friends with this guy for 20 years. And he said stuff like he was privileged where he could just grab women by the pussy. And that shows you that he's elite. And he talked about being elite. He said, unfortunately or fortunately, that's the case in his deposition when he was asked about this. And so the reality is this guy's the opposite of what his supporters think he is. Trump is the ultimate elitist. I mean, what other elitist would say that because he's elite, he's famous and he's rich, he can just walk up to any woman and grab her by the pussy, and that's one of the perks, right? That's just what he can do. I mean, who else would say that? This guy's just right in your face saying, I have privileges. That's a sexual assault. And every Democratic woman, every liberal woman that hates you, all these, I mean, all these people that aren't blown away by your celebrity, that you can just do that. That's what you want to do. You can do whatever you want, right? No, this is him saying it, right? Like he has these privileges because he's elite, and he sells himself as the anti-elite president, and these dumb fucks have bought into it. I mean, it's like so silly. Okay, the dude that threw the sandwiches in here at the cops. So I want to feature that in my next video. This video is going to be pretty long. But let's get back to the Newsom thing with Trump here.
Something where we can take care of both.
Mr. President, you were talking about the CBO report that 2 of your cabinet members were talking about. I remember back on Liberation Day, many of us reporters covered your detractors, people saying that it was going to explode the deficit and therefore explode the debt. Who all has called you to say I was wrong?
That's very good. You know the answer to that.
They've got these kiss-ass reporters. The only way this works is if Trump is really great, right? Like this whole thing where they sit around the cabinet and kiss his ass. You shouldn't need that. Like, I get compliments all the time in comments from people that like my whatever it is, right? And, in the beginning when I first started to do this, when you're not so sure that you have something to offer, whatever, you're in the beginning of anything, when you're not established and you don't really know what you're doing, you're a rookie, right? When you're just starting off doing something new, you need positive reinforcement. You need encouragement, like, because otherwise you'd want to quit, right? But I was compelled to do this anyway. This is part of my destiny. So the more you do something competently, the less you need reinforcement. It's good to know that this stuff is helping people. I mean, just on a, not an ego level, but on a, that it helps to motivate you to do more, right? When you're making things, you're cooking food and people like it, it makes it better. It makes it, it's good. Not that you need, that you should need somebody. It shouldn't be about your self-worth. But Trump has really low self-worth and a lot of personal doubts that he's covered up with narcissism. That's what narcissism is. People who have an internal voice that telling them they're a piece of shit, and so they cover it up with something else. Like the borderline personality disorder. There's a narcissistic personality disorder. But the borderline personality disorder, people think they're evil. And so they do things to cover up. They don't want other people to see what they see. Like they see themselves as evil, right? And so people who need this kind of veneer of whatever Trump is getting here, and especially at this stage of his life, it means that he's deep down thinks he's a complete failure and a fucking loser. And he's the opposite of what he says. Like everything he says is to externalize something that he doesn't believe internally. Like he thinks if he says it loud enough, the inner voices telling him that he sucks will disappear. The insecurities, right? So he needs these things, and it looks like he's got confidence and he has bravado. But there's the sign: the bigger the front, the bigger the back, right? And so he's covering up for something, and so that's bad. Like when you have a leader like that, it means that you're doomed to failure because deep down he knows that he's a failure, right?
Okay, yeah, please.
Governor Pritzker said yesterday that at a press conference that he would encourage nonviolent resistance to the National Guard if they were sent to Chicago. What's your response to that?
He said what?
That he would encourage nonviolent resistance if the National Guard.
So that's his response. This is the part of this. When the news says that Trump can't do this much longer, they've never had an answer for him because he's being backed by the powers that be. So his response is that the government, U.S. government, is going to force National Guard into Chicago, and he's going to say, well, you guys can sit there and hand them flowers and, like nonviolent protests. And so that's your answer? Like that's what you got as a governor, right?
Sent to Chicago.
Look, this guy doesn't know what resistance is or nonviolent resistance is. He's a bad...
What? He doesn't know that?
Politician. It's amazing. I mean, if he didn't have the money, he wouldn't get any votes because there's no compelling reason to vote for him. The guy's a major loser. But it would be nice if he would call me.
You know, he says people losers a lot. And so, like, that's, you know, what he believes about himself, right?
I would change my mind immediately. He said, you know, because everybody knows Chicago is a hellhole right now. Everybody knows. It's not like he's saying Chicago has much better numbers, right? Well, what's much better? You mean 100 people are going to be murdered? It's going to be much more than that. So I would have much more respect for Pritzker if he'd call me up and say, I have a problem. Can you help me fix it? I would be so happy.
Yeah, no one wants National Guard. I mean, this is, you know, authoritarianism. He wants to get troops into every one of these major cities, which should be a concern for everybody. Posse comitatus. This goes against the whole, you know, the part of the Constitution. He's just doing it, and nobody can stop him. Supreme Court's not going to try to stop him, and no one is, right? So, because the people that run the system, the people behind him, are letting him do this. They're encouraging him to do this. It's what they want, right?
I don't love, not that I don't have the right to do anything I want to do. I'm the president of the United States. If I think our country...
I have the right to do anything I want to do. This is a big statement right here. I'm going to need to meme this up here.
I'm the president of the United States.
Let's go back a little bit.
To do it. I don't love, not that I don't have the right to do anything I want to do. I'm the president of the United States. If I think our country's in danger, and it is in danger in these cities, I can do it. No problem going in and solving, you know, his difficulties. But it would be nice if they'd call and they'd say, would you do it? And we do it in conjunction. Now,
it'd be nice, but I can do anything I want. But, you know, it'd be nice if he did that. You know, I'm just seeing this for the first time. He goes off on Gavin Newsom. He makes fun of Gavin Newsom's hands, which is funny because Gavin Newsom's been calling him small hands, right? You know, whenever Trump is accused of something, he attacks somebody else on that very same thing, which is, you know, old Karl Rove tactics, that you don't address your weaknesses. If somebody accuses you of something, you accuse them of the exact same thing back, which is a fucked up thing to do. You know, on a spiritual level, this is all, you know, you're fucking yourself, right? It's all accounted for. But for him to say, I can do anything I want to do, you can't. Like, that's the whole idea of a presidency and checks and balances. And this is the most anti-American fucking guy, the most anti-patriotic. All these patriots, all these, you know, these groups, the Oath Keepers, they should all be up in arms about this guy. He's rolling over the Constitution. He doesn't have the right to do whatever he wants to do. I can do whatever I want to do. No, you can't. Like, I'm president. That's not what president means. You're an elected official. You're not a king. You're here in the will of the people. And so there's checks and balances to prevent monarchy and religious, you know, theocracy and things here. Separation of church and state, and, you know, all these checks and balances, you know, Congress and the Senate and, you know, the judiciary. So these are checks and the media. And so you can't do everything you want to do. Like, that's right there should be enough. That should just hang this motherfucker. Like, that should be it. He should be done politically for saying I can do whatever I want to do. Like that. And no one else will notice it. I mean, maybe somebody will, but it'll go, even if they do, who cares? Nobody watches mainstream media. I mean, even the most popular podcasts, Joe Rogan or people like that, could talk about this. Wouldn't make a difference. You know, all the Trumpers, all the people on Truth Social could post this and talk about it, because he thinks he can do whatever he wants to do, so he's not listening to anybody. So, you know, writing about it or crying about it and complaining about it isn't going to do shit, right?
Work very well with the police because we naturally get along with the police. So the police and us work really well together, whether the mayor is opposed or whether, I mean, you have a really rotten mayor there too. He's got a 6% approval rating in Chicago. And I see black women wearing a red MAGA hat last night on television. Please let the president come in. My son was attacked. You have a force of black women.
Black women.
They're like only Trump. They want Trump to come in. And you see them. They're all over.
Who is this Trump you speak of?
Place in Chicago because they're afraid to go out and they don't want their son or their daughter killed, just like your parents didn't want you killed. And we have a tremendous...
Trump will take one person, Like there might have been one black woman with a MAGA hat, and then say, well, this is all black people want this, right? Everybody in Chicago wants this. Like this is, because he wants people to validate him in some way, whatever it is. It's just like all these liberal media outlets are showing right-wing politicians having, Republicans having open house, having whatever those things are called, those town hall meetings, and Democrats screaming at them, and they make it sound like the whole country's against them, but it's just Democrats. Like it's not, it's hard to say with Trump, because I've been calling the Trumpers dumb fucks for a while, and I'm not getting as much pushback as you would think, like almost none. And maybe Trumpers don't watch my stuff or they just leave or whatever, which is a smart thing. But, I think a lot of them they kind of realize they've been punked by this guy, right? They realize they've been fooled by this guy. I think I think he's really unpopular. And maybe they don't even want to say it out loud. That's the thing about these groups, the MAGA groups, these people, they don't want to be, they don't want to go against their relatives or their friends or whatever, their group. But I think more and more of them are like, oh man, we got punked, we got fooled. He's taking advantage of us. But, none of that stuff's going to stop him. Popularity is no longer a factor for Trump. Trump is not going to run again for election. He'd either just try to stay president and cancel the next election, which is he's totally capable of doing that. But I think the Democrats will have so much power in the House and Senate by then, and he'll be falling apart physically so much,
Look, it's not about winning elections because we want to have nice, fair elections. It's not politics. We want to see a safe country. You have people that want to see a safe country, and they're great people. You have great people in Chicago.
There's no safety. Like, fucking safety is an illusion. And like you think the National Guard's going to make it safer? Like you think that's better? You're going to give up your freedom to, you're going to do posse comitatus? This is silly.
The mayor is at 6% approval. He's an incompetent man. He should have never been put in a position like that. He can't handle it. You have an incompetent governor there. You have an incompetent governor in California, Gavin. I know him very well. He's incompetent. He's a nice guy, looks good. Hi, everybody. How you doing? He's got some strange hand action going. I don't know what the hell his problem is. It's a little weird, to be honest.
It's a little weird, to be honest with you. Gavin Newsom, they called him Donald Tiny Hands Trump, because he's sensitive about the size of his hands. They're always, that was the whole thing. I remember Marco Rubio was doing it. And so all of a sudden, Gavin Newsom has, small, he has weird hand action. The thing is that when I talked about Kamala in my last video, I think a video before that, where they removed Secret Service from her, she doesn't need it because nobody hates her anymore. No one cares about her. Because they give you people to hate. And right now, the right-wing people who still are loyal to Trump, they hate Gavin Newsom. That's the Democrat du jour. There's AOC and there's, the Hillary Clinton stuff that still lingers. They really hated Hillary. She was more than just the person they served up. But now it's Gavin Newsom. And this is what I was talking about, good versus evil, and people think, well, this is where the evil is. You get rid of Gavin Newsom, you get rid of the evil. Well, that doesn't work. It has never worked. People are vehicles for evil, because evil is something that exists within people, and that it has to be personally eradicated. You have to cast out the hatred and the anger and the fear and the doubt and all these things that weaken a person. You have to cast out all those things and replace it with not only good character qualities, but a deep connection to the divine. So this is what the idea of cleaning out some scars is in the Sage-Mark system. You clean out the undesirable things and you replace them with good things, right? And, people don't want to do that because people are attached to their evil, right? The evil that exists inside of them. They want it, they don't want to remove it they don't want to remove their addictions and their negative things. They're attached to the darkness.
There's a little something shaky going on there. But, all he has to do is call me and say, we have the Olympics coming up. We want to make it really good and safe. and I'll put some really good, great American patriots in there, and you won't have any problems. Don't forget, it's loaded up with some stone cold killers, some really bad people, some people that were just born to be bad. They're criminals, bad criminals, dangerous. And
but what about Jeffrey Epstein and the people that participated with that guy? What about that guy that you were friends with? Like you're friends with all these people, mass murderers like Putin and fucking Netanyahu. Like Netanyahu's a really good guy, right? They just ordered the killing of 20,000 Palestinian kids. This is bad luck for them. Those guys are they're not stone cold killers, right? Like the powerful people that can, they can order the death of tens of thousands of people. They can order ethnic cleansing. Like he's pals with all those people. Companies that can poison people or put things out there that hurt people and take people in the wrong direction. Those people are okay, but not these these random killers that kill one or two people. We got to launch a whole fucking military action to stop those guys. But let these other guys murder each other in Russia and in Palestine and these things, Ukraine.
we can solve the problem for them very quickly.
Okay,
you know what I think? I think this. You have not had this happen for 4 years. You sat and you'd ask one question to Biden, and it was always the ice cream question, right? What flavor ice cream do you like best? I like vanilla. And that was the end of the conference. I think now we've done enough. These people are very busy. I want to just thank, this is the greatest, this has never been done before. First of all, a cabinet meeting was sacred. You'd never let the fake news media in.
Yeah, I mean, only if you were guaranteed that every person would tell you how great you were and lavish praise and lick your taint. This is not a cabinet meeting, it's a taint licking meeting. Like, I've never seen anything so gross in my life, right? Every one of these people has to kiss your ass. Like, unbelievable. And like, if you were that great a guy, you wouldn't need that. You would have humility. You would, you'd be doing God's work, and you would be, Trump either has to be the greatest or that he's got to be the worst. He can't be in between. He's not he's not doing things by small measures. He's got to be brilliant and a genius, and he's got to be making America great again, or he's got to be destroying America. In his history, he's always gone bankrupt. He's always failed. He has a history of failure. Failed marriages. 3 failed marriages, right? If you call that what he's got now to that, that dude now that he's married to, a marriage, right? And then all these other failures in business and life, he doesn't have successes. His successes are marginal, and they're exaggerated, right? He's good at stealing things. He's good at flim-flamming people. Like, that's not success, right? That's a criminal endeavor. He's good at being a grifter. But that's it, right? He's good at convincing people of his bullshit. He's got a good line of bullshit, as he's talked about it with these other guys. Anyways, let's wrap this thing up here. I want to finish this up with, I want to talk about Labor Day in a deeper meaning. And this idea of, this thing with Jerry Jones and Trump. When you're 80 years old and you're still desperately trying to prove yourself, you're still trying to make your mark on the world. And it shows a lack of going through the natural stages of life, right? Like, I'm at that stage where, I've lived my life, and I've done what I've done. I am, my material accomplishments and failures are there, right? The things that, I could have done better, the things that I succeeded in. And then you're just wrapping things up. So if you, come into work and you have a lot of energy, you're positive, feel pretty good. And then you're, hours away from punching the clock. You know what I mean? You're 10 minutes away from, not hours, 10 minutes away from punching the clock. Your attitude's a lot different, right? You have something to do outside of work you're looking forward to. You're going home, whatever, to do something. And, you can't wait to wrap it up. You're wrapping things up. The school year, they had this thing called senioritis when I was in high school. I don't know if they still call it that. But you had seniors in high school that, you were just kind of over high school. And you weren't trying as hard. You maybe already got into college. And so these teachers called it senioritis, where you weren't showing up to school. You weren't paying attention, these things. Like, you sort of, you were over high school. You're ready to move on. Like, people have that. in relationships and things in life where you see it's like, all right, this thing's kind of over with, and you're in the end of it, right? You're in the tail end of it. And I've been very clear, like when you're an older person, you need to have goals, and spiritual goals are the most important because your spirituality, God's always there. Your relationship with God is never old. It's never stagnant. It's never something you graduate from. You're always moving forward in that. You're always going deeper into it. As long as you're going deeper into it and you're moving forward. There's so much room for growth and understanding. And you have to have goals. You have to have things you do every day. You just, and I'll get into Labor Day thing in a second, this idea that work is bad. And I'll talk about that in a moment. But people have this idea of retirement. I saw this with my dad. My dad complained about his job. He complained about his commute. And he couldn't wait to retire. And, he had this slave job. He was a guidance counselor. And we moved out, 45 minutes away from his job. So we had this long drive. And he had to go over this mountain every morning. And he talked about how hard it was for him to do. I mean, really, he's kind of a pussy. But, when he retired, he had nothing. Like he said, he played golf. He sucked at golf, right? I've been showing this picture of a garden spider. I talked about the spider that crawled and touched my ear when I was watching TV, which was kind of unpleasant. But I have this great picture of garden spiders. There's two big garden spiders next to each other. And they always show up at the end of the year. We have this field of goldenrod that just blankets the whole pasture in bright yellow gold color. And when they show up, the praying mantis show up and they start mating, and you can see them. Like we don't see them pretty much the whole year, and then we start seeing them in late August, September, and these starting to get towards the end of their lifespan. And these things are mating and dying and laying egg sacs and things. The butterflies start to, we start seeing caterpillars and whatever. So I have a picture of this garden spider, which I'm going to feature in my last video of Journey series, the 211th. And when I was a kid, when I went to golf with my dad, we went to this place called Buena Vista Golf Course. It was a 9-hole golf course, a little golf course. And I think it was the second or third hole. You had to hit it over a creek and then onto the green. And then you had to walk down over the creek. And there was always, every time I went there was this big giant garden spider, huge. It was just build a web there every year. And oftentimes you find that these animals, these insects will have a territory or it'll be it was a newborn. It wasn't the same one every year. It was the old spider died, a new one, it laid its eggs, and another one would build its nest there, its web. And, there was a time where I played with my dad there a couple times. We went golfing. I really loved golf. But then he came back, and now I'm 6'1", and I'm strong, and I'm a good athlete. My dad's 5'9", 5'10". And we're playing golf, and there's guys up on the green. And my dad, when I was a kid, wouldn't let me try to hit it over the creek because, he didn't want to lose golf balls. But I'm I can hit over the creek. And he's like, you go ahead and hit. I'm like, no, there's people up on the green. And he's like, you're never going to hit. I'm like, dude, I can totally hit them. I'm not good at it. But if I catch hold of one, I'm going to hit them. I'm not a consistent golfer, but I have the potential to hit them. And my dad's like, go ahead and hit it. And I hit it, and it almost hits a dude on the green. And they start yelling at us, and I just pointed to my dad. I'm like, he wanted me to hit it. I'm like, you want me to hit it, dude? Something bad could happen. And so, he didn't realize that I had grown up, and I'm a totally different physical person. And then we're playing golf at the end of, we're at hole 8 or 9. It's the same guys, and they're kind of slow. It's 4 old guys, right? And my dad's probably in his 70s. I'm 20-something, whatever it is. And he goes, well, he was 45, I don't know. It just doesn't matter. He's 45 years older than me, so I'm 20. Yeah, he's probably close to his 70s. And he goes, hit it. And I'm like, dude, I can totally hit them again, right? We already hit him. I almost hit him the first time. He didn't believed I could do it. And, you know, it was something funny because they were probably two of my best golf shots ever. When my dad was like, yeah, you're not going to hit them. And I'm like, all right. You know, so, like, I mean, I'm not a consistent golfer. And when I drove the ball, I would often hook it. You know, and that's why I didn't like it, because I couldn't hit the thing consistently. You know, and I wasn't willing to put in the work to do it. But when I hit it well, right? And so, and I hit the green again. And they're like, come on. These guys are all yelling at us. And I pointed to my dad. And so, you know, my dad complained about his job, but he retired and he sucked at golf. He didn't like to play, and he didn't do anything else but watch TV and eat. He got irritable bowel syndrome, so he couldn't eat anymore. And then his cataracts and eyes got bad, so he could only listen to TV. He couldn't see it. So he's basically blind, can't eat, and, you know, he's dead. Like, there's nothing there. I think he was kind of a jerk off too, but so, you know, but all that stuff, he doesn't have, it's his physical body and the things he liked to do, and he doesn't have a purpose anymore. So, you know, when you're an older person, you have to have a purpose. Some of your purpose is teaching young people. Some of your purpose is, you know, gardening, doing things like that, growing food, connecting with nature. Some of your purpose is preparing for your death and, you know, connecting with you're transitioning from life to death. You know, so you have these things that you have to do. And so I believe that you have goals and purpose, but one of your you know, things to do isn't to get a hard job. You know, these people that end up being corporate executives and they don't want to leave, and doing a bad job and ruining something because you no longer have the mental capacity and energy to do it. And you've aged out generationally. The world has changed and you don't get it because you can't get it. Because it's not the world that you know, right? People who are 80s, I mean, the world isn't the way I knew it when I grew up. But I've adjusted to it to whatever extent. But the kids today, they're just nothing like, it's hard for me and my wife to understand kids today. I mean, it's really difficult for people in their 50s, 40s, and 50s and 60s, certainly 70s and 80s, to understand what's going on in the youth and all these things. And so this is why Joe Biden and Trump and Jerry Jones, they're failing, because like the world has changed and they're just not capable anymore. And they should have moved on to another stage in their life, but they refuse to because they're still trying to prove themselves. There's still some kind of deep, you know, insecurities and whatever it is, some like stuff that's there, right? And there's a selfishness, right? Like you have to, you know, part of your journey is about turning it over to the youth, like turning things over to the younger generation, your kids, and, you know, in a village type situation where you prepare them, and then you're taking some, you know, some comfort and solace in the fact that and hopefully they're exceeding you, like you've prepared them to go beyond what you've reached. And that's just hasn't happened. Like each generation gets worse. And that's always on the older generation as a failure. So then that's the first part. The second part is the system has wrecked the idea of education and learning by making school so fucking unpleasant that you associate school with learning and people just stop learning, which is intentional. And they've done the same thing with days like Labor Day because, you know, work is sacred. Like you never stop working. Your work changes and transforms, but there's always work. And, you know, in the Sajmark method of teaching, that the reward for work is more work. Like we think the reward for work is retiring and getting rid of, you know, stopping working altogether. Like work is bad and now I can retire from my work. And then the people just fall apart physically, mentally, emotionally, because they don't have any purpose anymore. If you don't have any purpose, there's no, I'm just going to go on vacation for 15 years and not do anything, like not have any responsibilities, not have any stress, not have any, you know, not living, right? Like it's just going to be, you know, this idea you're going to heaven for 70 virgins and a mule. You know, this idea of heaven itself is like, you know, like some sort of vacation paradise where everything's good and, you know, everything is, you know, brilliant and, you know, beautiful and just whatever. Perfect. Utopia. There's none of that. Like you're always working. You're always working to achieve something. You have to have a purpose. Like every animal, every creature has a job to do. They have a role to play in the world. And when they stop doing that role, then they die. There's no purpose for them. It's what keeps you going. And so you know your role changes as you get older. but you have to have it. Like, and so work is a good thing. But we hate our jobs and we hate school so much, we think work is bad, and we think that school is bad, learning is bad. So people stop learning and they stop valuing their work because their work is some slave job piece of shit that they hate. And they don't realize that, you have to be doing both. You have to be learning and working your whole life. And so that's why Labor Day is a bunch of bullshit. Anyways, let me wrap this one up here. Only spirituality will save this world. It's paramount, definitely important for the apocalypse. And the ascension, everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.